Welcome back, everyone. We are doing a general knowledge video. This is called What Happened to Paris's Medieval Islands. And I'm curious because I don't know what he's talking about. And that's always the best video for me. Because when I have no idea about it at all, it's just like an adventure. So come on and join me today on this adventure of what happened to these mysterious islands I don't even know about.
When you look at a map of Paris today, you can spot a few islands along the Seine River that
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm thinking of, but what are you thinking of?
flows through the city. The main one is Île de la Cité, where the famous Notre Dame Cathedral is located, as well as the Sainte-Chapelle. It's actually where the first part of the city emerged, perhaps justifying its name, Island of the City. Others are the upstream Île de Saint-Louis, the very thin stripe of the Île aux Cygnes, and the larger Île de Saint-Germain and Île Ségouin. These last two are technically outside the department of Paris proper, but still they're on the Seine in the city.
Okay, I didn't even know about those three, so we're learning.
But when you look at medieval versions of the maps of the city, you can find a number of other islands along the Seine that just
Interesting. If this is medieval, this is 700 years ago, 600 years ago, 500 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark. Map makers tend to make phantom islands sometimes. Also, erosion happens, obviously. 3 and 4 look similar to kind of like what that previous modern one looked like. Let's go.
aren't there anymore. Île Maquerelle, Île aux Juifs, Île de la Gourdaine, Île Louvière, Île aux Vaches, and Île Notre-Dame. That's 7 islands that are just gone. Also 7 islands that I probably just mispronounced the name of. You have to give me a little leeway in this video. To figure out this mystery and understand what happened to each of these other islands, I spent a whole time looking at maps, reading some books and articles, but then I thought, what better way to figure it out than to go there? So let's go to Paris.
I'd love to go to Paris. Maybe not right this, in this. It's October 2025. Been a little testy over there, so maybe not too soon, but I definitely want to go.
Right now, we're standing on Île de la Cité. It's one of Paris's only 2 natural islands on the River Seine, and it's a whopping 22 acres of land. In the 4th century, it was the site of the local Roman Empire area governor of the region. And then in 508 AD, Clovis I, the first king of the Franks, established his palace on this same island. In the 12th century, it expanded its importance by becoming the home of the Notre Dame, which you can see right behind me.
Which they had to rebuild in, what was it, 2020 or 2019?
But while the Seine only has 2 natural islands today, it used to have a lot more. Right now we are at the Île Saint-Louis, which is upstream of the Île de la Cité, where we were just on, where the Notre Dame is. Interestingly, this island, Île Saint-Louis, also used to be 2 separate islands, Île aux Vaches and Île Notre Dame.
Yeah. This is what I was thinking, and they just bridged them together.
Which is weird because the Notre Dame wasn't on it. But at some point, the city of Paris wanted to connect both sides of the city with a bridge, and so that bridge ran between the other 2 islands, uniting them and creating the now very large Île Saint-Louis. And just upstream from this one, there used to be another island called Île Louvière, named after the man who owned it in 1408. As we were walking down the Seine, we saw a couple street vendors that had reproductions of old maps, and so I got this one, which actually seems to show this island that disappeared. We have Île de la Cité here with the Notre Dame, then we have Île Saint-Louis, where we are right now, still seems to be divided into 2 old islands,
And there's
and then
another
we
one.
have the Île Louvière that has now disappeared and become a part of the city, joining with it. That island was bought by the city of Paris in the year of 1700. And by 1847, the arm of the Seine that separated it from the rest of the city and made it an island was filled in by the city. Today, it is the area between Boulevard Morlin and Quai and Louis
Oh,
IV. Just like the
that's cool.
Île aux Vaches, the Notre Dame Island, or the Île Louvière that disappeared, there are also a few other medieval islands of Paris that no longer exist. So now I'm gonna go back home and try to do some research to find out what happened to them.
Bro just went to go to that island. I think he lives in Portugal, so it's not that terribly far comparatively to like I was to do that, but still, it's quite interesting.
Okay, now I'm back. I was actually already here when I filmed the first part of the video, as you can probably tell from my outfit. But it's the magic of editing. We already got a pretty good idea about what happened to some of these islands from what I just said when I was there, but I want to go a little deeper into each of them and also get into the other three that I didn't mention in my location filming. I want to figure out what they were like, what happened to them. So let's start with the biggest one, Île Louvière.
Île Louvière.
This map or blueprint shows us on the left Île Notre Dame, the upper half of the modern Île Saint-Louis. On the right we have Île Louvière. I was standing right here in that earlier clip, but instead of being on the coast of an island, I was just in the middle of a regular street. The island seems to have existed since as early as there are any records.
Oh, yeah.
And the name we know it by seems to have been given in 1408 when a man called Nicolas de Louvière, a leader of the Paris Merchant Guild, bought it, giving it its name and using it for pastures, essentially. Soon after, a training ground for crossbowmen was installed there, and the Merchant Guild decided to build a small fort to donate to King Henry II. In this map of Truchet and Oyot from 1550, that's probably the structure that we see depicted on it.
Ah.
And I find it pretty fascinating. You know, these are islands that, okay, were around until not that long ago, a few hundred years, but we still have records of all of these tiny details of things that took place there. I mean, the fact that we know that there was a crossbow training ground, I don't know, it seems pretty fascinating to me. Louvière's family sold the island to a man called Dantrag, who kept the name and whose respective heirs sold it to the city of Paris government in the year of 1700. The city then leased it to timber merchants, allowing them to land and store beams, girders, king posts, and rafters, among many other items. The rental price was 40,000 francs per merchant per year. Turgot's map from 1734 shows those logs of timber laid in different piles on the island.
That's so cool. And you also have all these call these gondolas. What would you call these? Just boats, just littered. Obviously this is probably a place where things come and go so quick. So because I wouldn't know. And also, as you see, just like ever so slightly, you can see sort of like how there's like a bridge and there's like this other pathway that kind of like moves water. It's almost like this waterway is strictly for water versus like boat, you know, how it's like set up with almost like a drain.
Turgot was a French politician at the time. He seems to be the author, or at least the financier of this map. He was quite powerful during the reign of Louis XVI. He was appointed Secretary of the Navy, and he's also credited with building these barriers on the tip of the island, shown here on the map, apparently to keep ice that flowed from the Seine in the winter from going into the city. So it's interesting because this way we learn that these islands not only had a purpose in their land, you know, right now they were storing the timber there, but also the little arm that separated it from the rest of the city also served a purpose. They built these barriers to keep the ice from...
Ice flows in the Seine from a Monet painting. Interesting. And art. One thing that a lot of people look over, and I did for the longest time, and it's about art. You know, art is one of the most notable like pathways into history that we can look at, just because, you know, artifacts survive, obviously, oral and written word survives, but art kind of gives you another dimension. Not only are you able to read about something, but you're able to actually see it. Art is so important. So important.
Coming in and I guess maybe ruining boats or houses. By 1793, the island passed from the control of the city of Paris to the national government. This was because, in the meantime, a metal factory had been set up there, and the government requisitioned it for the manufacture of weapons. This was a time of the French Revolutionary Wars, and so I guess the government needed to manufacture more weapons to keep down the rebels. Didn't really work out very well for them, but it's interesting to see, again, that this island was in the midst of one of France's most important national events
And it makes sense. It's nearly the center of the city.
in their history. In the following decades, not much happened there, other than a handful of notable footnotes. In 1806, the island was returned to the city. In 1816, it remained uninhabited and served as a firewood storage. In 1817, a physics institution was proposed to be created there, but the idea was abandoned. Finally, in 1843, the arm of the Seine, which separated it from the rest of the city, was filled in. It seems that already during the summer, the water receded and you were able to cross by foot.
The evolution of the Seine basin water bodies, 46, 89, or 99. Oh, interesting stuff here.
So this wasn't a crazy decision by the city, it was just a natural evolution of the river that they sped up.
Makes sense.
And so Île Louvière was no more, becoming a part of the city proper. Now, this video is about Paris, but another super cool European city is Venice, which, what a coincidence, is the name of the sponsor of today's video, Venice AI. It's viewer and that central model to propulsion directly. If you want knowledge, the two islands that now make up the existing Île Saint-Louis, the former islands of Vache and Notre Dame. But hold on to your hats, because it used to be one big island to begin with, called Île Notre Dame. It's quite confusing because Île Notre Dame is not the island that Notre Dame was on. Instead, it took its name, apparently, because it was given by King Charles the Bald to the Bishop of Paris and to the canons of Notre Dame in the year of 867.
Makes sense.
It was initially mainly used as a grazing and warehouse area, sometimes for ceremonies such as medieval tournaments. In the 13th century, Paris was fortified by the walls of Philippe Auguste, arguably the first French king, who built them to defend the city from the English. He was leaving for the Third Crusade, and so he ordered the construction of a stone wall to protect the capital in his absence.
Interesting.
To build the walls, a channel was dug into the island, creating a small arm of the Seine which cut the old island in two. The northern half continued to be Île Notre Dame, and the southern one became Île de Vache, Island of Cows. I guess the island was used for the grazing of cows. That's the most obvious explanation that, my mind is immediately
It's gotta
drawn
be,
to.
right?
The same map of Trouchet and Oyo from 1550 shows the two islands, one completely deserted and one with small structures. The deserted one seems to have been Île aux Vaches. It was totally uninhabited and covered mainly with meadows, used for games and clothes washing. By the end of the 17th century, the stream that split these two islands was filled in again, and so the island once again became whole. The reason why seems to be that there was a need, or at least a desire, to urbanize them, and it would be easier to do in a single island.
Yeah, rapid population, you gotta figure out where to put these people.
And then in two. The construction began during the reign of Henri IV. It saw the construction of a large number of private mansions, which led to its nickname, the Island of Palaces. But the official name was only changed in 1725. Not to the Island of Palaces, but to the Island of Saint Louis, after Saint Louis, patron saint and ancestor of Louis XIII. According to legend, he used to come and prey on the Island of Cows and would have taken a cross there with his knights in 1269 before leaving for a crusade. This map from 1630 shows a time when the two islands were still separated, but more structures had begun to appear on Île Notre Dame.
And look at these little tiny bridges. So cool.
Île Louvière is still visible upstream of it.
And what is that like? Is that like a crossing? Like a boat crossing, like the dotted lines? Is that like, because like if you go to Google Maps right now, you can see like the transport lines of like old, or of like ship routes. I wonder if that's like what this is. It's like a It's like a crossing similar to how there was crossings like on, for example, the Thames, where you would have like you would pay someone to cross from here to there, and that was like a whole industry. I wonder if that's a similar thing here.
Too. And downstream, we can see Île de la Cité with one of the Notre Dame Cathedral's towers peeking up from the bottom. A little interesting or fun fact is that by 1924, the island actually had its own newspaper. It was called the Sémaphore, which they called an organ for the defense of the material and spiritual interests of the islanders.
Of the islanders, that's so funny.
And the inhabitants of the island actually called themselves Ludovisians, interestingly differentiating themselves from the rest of the Parisians.
Wow.
Also, it seems there was, or maybe still is, a restaurant there today that uses the Isle of Cow's name, I guess as a historical reference to the now gone island.
That's awesome.
Okay, so now we've understood what happened to 3 of these disappearing islands, but what about the other 3 that I mentioned at the start? They were Île Maquerelle, Île aux Juifs, and Île de la Gourdaine. Île Maquerelle itself is quite interesting because it had a second name, the same one as an island that currently exists in Paris but isn't the same one, way downstream in the Seine, Île aux Cygnes island.
That one seems like it would just get like similar to the first one where it would just become part of the mainland, you know?
Of Swans is this narrow and stretchy island, but hundreds of years ago, another one used the same name. Île Maquerelle was also known as the Island of Swans. It was located further north in the 7th arrondissement. The current one is the 15th, although it's right next to it. It used the Swans nickname because there were swans on it, placed by royal decree in the year of 1676. But Maquerelle was the main name that they used. This city plan by Roussel from 1730 shows it with both names.
Wow.
And the origin of the name is actually pretty interesting. It may derive from the terms male, meaning bad, and querelle, meaning fight, because the island is registered as the place where many ancient nobles would go to duel.
Whoa.
Another theory says it was named after a brothel that existed there during the reign of Louis XV. Some others say it was named after a man who owned it. We don't really know, so I guess you could just choose whichever story you prefer. I'm gonna go with the one with the duels. It seems pretty cool. What's even more interesting here is that this same ghost island was formed by, guess what? Even other small islands that also disappeared before it. Islets, to be more correct. Isle of Grenelle, Isle of Trelle, Isle...
And this is like natural erosion. If you ever look at like a delta, you know, look at the Nile Delta, you'll have similar like geographic and, you know, erosion effects there. So yeah, this makes perfect sense. So I guess they just filled it in.
Isle of Jerusalem, Isle of Longchamp, and Isle of Vache, not to be confused with the other cow island that we just learned about. This was a separate one. A bunch of interesting historical moments took place there as well. It was used as a defense in the siege of Paris in 1885 when the Vikings sailed down from the sea into the Seine and raided the kingdom. Took place there as well. It was used as a defense in the siege of Paris in 1885 when
1885. It's got to mean, it means 885, right?
the Vikings sailed down from the sea into the Seine and
right.
raided the kingdom of West Franks, in which the various islands of the river were
845. Okay.
used as key defense outposts against the Viking longboats.
Interesting.
It held a factory to produce oil for the whole city's street lamps in 1774. In 1812, the canal that separated it from the mainland was filled in, and it became part of the city proper.
Yeah, makes
now,
sense.
if you've lasted this long into the video, good news, you're almost at the end, because the last 2 islands that we need to talk about existed side by side. There were Île aux Juifs and Île Gourdaine.
Based on how they are just like floating in the middle, it feels like they would just get like brushed away, right?
The first name translates to Jewish Island, although later it was renamed to Templars Island. It probably takes its name from the previous executions that were carried out there under the pretext of religion during the Middle Ages. Both Jewish people and then Templars were prosecuted, and at least many Templars were burned alive there. Many famous ones even, like Jacques de Molay, the very last master of the French Templars in 1314. The other island's name, Île Gourdaine, means ferry after the boats used to reach the island. Although I'm not sure what they were taking a ferry there for, because I couldn't find any record of anything existing on the island. Both of them were located just south of the Île de la Cité, the temple one to the left and the ferry one to the right. On this map from 1552, or on this one from 1575, they are still visible. Soon after, in 1607, bridges were built connecting both the islands and the much larger Île de la Cité, of which they became a part of. This painting shows us precisely that process.
See, what I was talking about. Art tells us history. That's so cool.
Today, their location is known as Place Dauphine, named after the, at the time, Dauphin, future king, Louis XIII.
Wow.
This is the view of the location today. So, those are the 6 islands that used to exist in medieval Paris, but don't anymore. Maybe there are a few more that I didn't mention in this video. I think it's likely considering the ways in which these just disappeared. If you're ever in Paris, it's a pretty cool tour to take on your own, you know, visiting all of the places that used to be islands but are now just part of the city and learning about all the interesting stuff that took place there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point you made about touring. I think, you know, you go to the top 10 places to visit website and you're going to have the tourist spots, but really, like, when you understand things like history and you really understand origins of places, you can kind of tailor it to your own adventure versus a you know, a plastic adventure, if that makes sense. It's also another noteworthy note to say there's probably a lot of places that are lost to history, like islands that, or not just islands, anything geographically that no longer exists just because of time. But this is a very interesting video, very nuanced video that, or not nuanced, very niche video when it comes to like a topic, but super cool because, you know, if you go to Paris and you visit one of these islands, you now know like there's a history besides it wasn't always, everything isn't as it was always, you know? So yeah, love this channel, general knowledge. Go subscribe to them. Thank you guys for being here. Peace out. Leave me some video suggestions. Consider subscribing, and goodbye.